After an eventful night, me and my best friend, Matthew, were leaving from a party one of his buddies hosted. The party itself was generic in my opinion. We told ghost stories out in the backyard, played video games, and did prank calls. You know, good old high schooler junk. After it was finally over, Matthew told me about how he thought he saw a man out in the woods behind the house when we were telling horror stories. Your mind is just playing tricks on you, because you've probably been frightened by the stories, I told him. But Fred, I swear I saw someone out in the woods, watching us, Matthew said. Dude, you're probably just seeing things. It was most likely a tall tree or something. All my life I've known Matthew, and he always seemed paranoid. It was most likely because he watches too many scary animations. I told him we could just crash at my place, so we walked the sidewalk leading to my house. We had arrived about 20 minutes from when our walk began, and we both collapsed onto the couch, exhausted and tired from the long day. Matthew planned to stay the night and leave the next morning, but when he was hanging up his jacket, his phone rang. He pulled it out, looked at it for a moment, and muttered, "Oh no." It was his mother on the other end when he answered, and she was complaining about why he had not returned yet. After a small argument over the phone, he hung up and sighed. I knew this would happen to me. So typical of her, he said. What is it? I asked. Mom wants me to come home right now. She wasn't happy with me coming to your house without notifying her. Oh, okay then. Want me to walk home with you? I suggested. Matthew refused the offer politely, then grabbed his jacket, said goodbye, and hustled off into the night. His house was about a 20-minute walk from mine, so during that time I decided to relax by playing Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, one of my favorite classic video games. After playing Team Vanquish for quite a while, I got a phone call from Matthew. Over the phone, he informed me that he made it home safely, but couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. While on his walk, he said he swore that he could hear thrashing of bushes in the distance, as if someone was watching him. Matt, these stories are making you paranoid. How about we both chill out, relax, and enjoy the rest of our night with some Garden Warfare? Come on, I'll send you an invite. He let out a sigh of relief and said, Yeah, I could use some relaxing, Fred. He hung up and instead joined my Xbox party using his microphone to communicate with me. Both of us were logged into Garden Warfare, and we decided to play a bit of Gardens and Graveyards before quitting for the night. Matthew had always mained plants while I mained the zombies, so that's exactly what we did for most of the matches. He was playing Cactus while I played Super Commando. Both of us struck up a conversation involving which classes and variants we liked and disliked in Garden Warfare. It was nice and quiet, as we both chatted and dropped multiple vanquishes here and there. We were just kids being kids. I think it was on our 4th Garden of Cactus Canyon night that we were both capturing and defending, when I noticed Matthew had become more silent than he was before. Matthew, you still there? I asked into my microphone. I could very quietly hear him mutter in the background. Dude, I hear like weird noises coming from downstairs. I feel like someone's down there. What? Is it one of your parents, you think? I asked. No, my parents left after I came back. They left to my grandma's for an emergency. I forgot to tell you, though. Where's your dog, Shara? Couldn't be her walking around, said I. No, she's spending the weekend out at grandma's too, Matthew assured me. That's weird. Well, you know, the houses in our neighborhood tend to creak a lot since they're old. It could be the odd noises from your house, I suggested. Yeah, I think you're right. These stories are getting to me. I'm becoming paranoid. We both chuckled and continued playing. Over the microphone, I did hear a loud creaking sound, almost like footsteps. Because of this, I remembered those stories from the party. Even though I didn't believe them, they were getting to my head. It was finally past midnight, and me and Matthew both agreed that it was a good time to call it a night. Tomorrow morning? I asked. Sure, I'll main zombies then, Matthew said. Alright, good night, dude. See you tomorrow, Fred, Matthew told me before we logged off. Tired, I shut off my console and changed into more comfortable clothes. Finally, I cuddled into my bed and watched the clouds roll by in the moonlight outside my window. This calmed me, and soon I was fast asleep. Abruptly, I jolted awake in the middle of the night. My room was very dark and was dressed in a dark blue shade. It was cold in my bedroom, and when I attempted to glance towards my alarm, I couldn't move. Then, startled, I tried to force my limbs to do something to no avail. I was stuck, staring at the ceiling, with my eyes being the only part of me I could control. I had gotten extremely anxious, as I had never had sleep paralysis before, but based on my knowledge of the topic, some really creepy things can happen during this state. My bed was placed in the very corner of the room, meaning every space was visible to me. So I braced myself for a shadow demon to be standing in the very corner of my room. To my surprise, nothing happened. It was completely silent except for the blowing leaves outside in the dark. My flat-screen TV sat on the far right of my bedroom, meaning I could easily see it. In the dark, I could very slightly hear the click of something in my room. I realized that this was the click that occurs after my TV is turned on. I laid there, still physically unable to budge, and I was unnerved. How could my TV have flickered on? Following that, my room was only dimly lit by the sudden gleam of my TV screen. It was now fully turned on, and then the screen appeared to be in the middle of a multiplayer match in Garden Warfare. I mean, it was like the television opened to the midst of a Gardens and Graveyards match. Yet, I noticed that my Xbox 360 wasn't even clearly powered on. The little Xbox icon, which would glow on the console, remained completely untouched even when the screen flashed on. This made me confused. I didn't see how it was possible. The contents of the screen quite concerned me too. It appeared to be the Cactus Canyon night map, somewhere near the trailer park. That was all that was present though. No playable third-person character, no HUD or any other player in the match. Nothing but the almost unnerving misty orange canyons and the moonlight blue sky. This was alarming, as I repeatedly questioned what I was witnessing. The silence was killing me. The lack of any change to come made me feel nervous. Soon, the light from the TV began to dim slowly until I was engulfed in the dark blue presence. At this point, I could pretty much only make out the TV screen, which shining brightly seemed to not lighten up the room. Then, in a snap, the television screen went completely black, cutting its power from the looks of it. Pitch darkness was the only thing in my vision for a period that felt like forever. Quickly after, the TV screen re-emerged with light, still showing the same screen from before. Only for this time, even from my distance away from the screen, I could clearly make out something in the map. It stood far and shot me a glare from across the canyons. It was a figure of an all-black shade, a shadow which stood straight up. The shadow had no visible eyeballs. In fact, its face was completely black and shaped very weirdly. It stood with this almost crooked stance. Its lanky arms and legs seemed to be bent slightly. It appeared to twitch and writhe like it was in pain. My heart began beating a bit faster. Who was this shadowy entity? I still don't know to this day. I began to closely examine the figure. I did so again twice. I soon put two and two together and realized that this thing, whatever it was, closely matched the silhouette of that of a brown coat or foot soldier zombie. Their head mainly was the clue, thin and large. It even stood with a crooked but similar posture to a zombie from Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. This made me especially confused and most definitely creeped out. In the lonely night, I saw him begin to creep towards the screen, in a swift but janky pace. My heart raced faster, as he was now up close in the center of the screen. Even with no eyes, I could feel him piercing my heart. He cocked his head to the right and then proceeded to squirm and twitch. It was like he was curiously observing whatever was behind the screen. He was in this position for a while before forcefully pulling his head back straight up. This startled me a lot. The sudden movements of this creature filled me with dread. Then, I saw from inside the screen, the figure's hand came into view, quite slowly. First it was his right hand, then he brought out his left hand, and then proceeded to place both hands on the screen. His hands shook vigorously, and so did his head. My heart was most definitely racing. At first I had believed that this was some kind of hacker. Again, the figure didn't budge from there, but instead the screen began to cut to static for a few seconds. It seemed that the TV was glitching out, and it made incredibly loud squeals. All of a sudden, my nightmares all came into reality when I realized that I was now staring at a hand. A thin, twitching black hand had emerged from the screen and began to wave itself around as if it was searching. I still could not move a muscle, nor could I shout. I was paralyzed, watching some horror show unfold in front of me. After more flickers of the screen, I fully understood what I was looking at was real. I could spot a second hand of the same complexion appear from beyond the static. Both of the hands in synchronized order clasped the sides of the TV. Then out of the screen emerged the forehead of the figure, soon followed by the rest of its head, his neck, and the rest of his body. He forced himself out of my TV and stepped into my darkened room. I was absolutely baffled by what I had just seen. Seriously, this shadow just crawled through my flat-screen TV onto my bedroom floor. I watched him continue to twitch, and he produced these disgusting, crackling sounds as he crookedly pulled himself up into a standing position. He took some time to stand straight up, twitching to and fro. My heart skipped beats. The figure stood right at the side of my bed and menacingly glared down into my eyes. And speaking of eyes, he indeed had some now. They were just two small bright dots with a little black pupil in the center of both. The figure made no sudden movements from there. He just ominously watched me from my bedside. I tried to tell the shadow to be gone, but nothing came out. My mouth was sealed shut. He didn't move for what felt like an eternity, until finally, with a few shakes and violent jitters, he quickly jolted his head down towards me. The shadow's face was only a few inches away from mine that moment. It startled me so much that I forced my eyes closed and began to shake and sweat with fear. I gathered the courage to lift up one of my eyelids, and sure enough, he was still perched at the side of my bed, clinging to the bedside rail with his fists. I could see him examining me with his pale, small eyes, and his jaw hung open slightly. Soft groans and teeth chattering struck me, as well as packages of warm but disgusting breath. He eyed me for a little while, before lifting up his arm and inscribing something in the air with his long, bony fingers. I don't know how I managed to retain what he wrote under such fear, but I did so. Following a few finger movements, I realized the shadow spelled out the word Matthew. Now I was confused. Matthew? What did he have to do with all this? The shadow paused, and just above where he wrote my friend's name, he wrote, "Help." The sentence was so simple, yet so many questions clouded my mind. Why? What was going on? What happened to Matthew? The figure refused to elaborate further, and instead stepped backwards a bit, before hunching over and covering his eyes with his palms. The final thing he did was remove his palms away from his face and let out a cry of what sounded like pain and despair. The wail echoed throughout my house that night, and I yet again forcefully closed my eyes out of the intense vibration the loud noise brought. Once the echo died down, I proceeded to cautiously take a peek at my room. The shadow was no longer present in my bedroom, and I noticed that my TV had finally powered off. I suddenly found myself free to move again, and I jolted upright in my bed, screaming for only a few seconds. I then stopped, breathing heavily as sweat soaked me in my bed. I then rubbed my eyes and let out a few coughs. All was quiet in my room once again, and I was relieved to be able to move again. Quickly, I snatched my phone from off my bedside desk and dialed Matthew. I didn't have an exact clue of what the shadow intended with that message, but I needed to inform Matthew about this. I dialed once, but he never answered. It just went to voicemail after a few rings. I dialed 3 times to no avail. I tried texting him, to which again, nothing came of it. Despite the late hour, I threw on my jacket and shoes and burst out of my home, running all the way to Matthew's house. I reached his front door after running for what felt like ages. I had pounded on his door, unaware of being very disrespectful, when I saw that his door was unlocked. This was an unpleasant sight, and with this knowledge, I took a single step inside his living room and called out, "Matthew?" The first place I thought to check was his bedroom, so I marched up the stairs to his room on the 2nd floor. His door, I could see, was unlocked, and it was cracked open slightly. I slowly pushed it open, and there was Matthew. He was lying sprawled out on the carpet, with bloodshot eyes and pale, hardened skin. He remained lifeless, and there on the side of his head, as well as his left leg and chest, were large, open wounds. His carpet was stained in crimson. My friend Matthew was dead. The glass to his bedroom window had been shattered. I was utterly horrified. My best friend was murdered, and I wasn't there to do anything. I dialed the police and Matthew's mother, telling them to arrive at the scene as quickly as possible. My heart shattered when informing Matthew's mom about the death of her son. Her voice broke into sorrowful sobs, and I couldn't help but try to calm her down over the phone. I couldn't believe it myself. I was heartbroken that my friend was killed by someone evil. Police arrived soon after and searched the entire property for any additional evidence. It was revealed that they found a man, dressed in a dark hoodie and pants, crouched down behind a tree in the woods behind Matthew's house. This man was identified as 28-year-old Jacob Alexander, who was confirmed to be Matthew's murderer. Thankfully, he was arrested, but that didn't stop me from grieving over Matthew's death. Soon, his mom and dad arrived to the scene, and his mom immediately ran into the house to check on her son. I could hear her cries of anguish from outside. There was nothing I could do except give them my apologies and walk home in silence. It wasn't until later that the news of Matthew's murder spread to my school, and my own parents heard it soon as well. For that reason, they left me to myself for most of the time. For every day that week, Matthew was the only thing on my mind. I would never speak to him ever again, and that completely destroyed me. The shadow figure I saw that night still stuck with me as well, and now, after Matthew's death, I finally understand what he was there for. That shadowy silhouette of a garden warfare zombie was there to warn me of Matthew's future fate. In fact, I read a true story of a similar scenario like the one I witnessed that night. A teenage girl, a few years older than me, claimed to have seen a shadow demon crawl out of her bedroom TV. The demon apparently then inscribed her mother's name in the air before vanishing. The girl stated that she too played Garden Warfare, and her mother died in a car crash that very night. I think that the shadowy figure was a demon, or something along those lines, which uses Garden Warfare as a way to travel to different players in order to inform them of near future tragedies they'll witness. For me, that was the death of Matthew. I'm still upset over what happened to my best friend. And to be honest, I don't know what to think of that demon. Although, I do know that I wish I believed Matthew about that figure in the woods.